Dia live a gwiniúsla agus fáilte go the Agler St. Nicholas an Loisha. Hello everyone, you're very welcome to St. Nicholas Collegiate Church once again for the second part of our four-part virtual tour of St. Nicholas Collegiate Church for this Heritage Week 2020. In 1320, this church was being extended. So what they did was they knocked down a great portion of the old little stone church, and this can be seen in the stonework outside in the graveyard, because you can see the old stones and then you can see the lovely new cut stones because they had employed French stonemasons. They raised the chancel. It's now a much higher roof than it would have been originally. The crossing has even gone a little bit higher, and they put two very narrow little transepts, both north and south of the crossing, and then of course they built the transept, which was now a longer, the main body of the church. The church was now a longer little church. Of course you can see pillars and arches. These would have been walls. In the Middle Ages, all Latin masses were chanted. Chant was a major part of the worship. Now in this church, up at the altar, now we call it the high altar, but the altar up at the east window, the priest would have been saying mass facing east, facing Jerusalem, and the prayers that he had to say out loud would have been chanted. And his assistant priests, who were called chanters, they would be in some of them in the crossing and some of them in the lower part of what we call now the chancel. And they would respond back in Latin. It was only those who had tutors or who went to a religious college actually learned Latin. The average person didn't learn Latin at all. And the congregation stood in the nave. There were no chairs, no pews. People stood. And they would have been in a mass for 2 hours, standing. Now, you can also see there's a little window that is blocked off just at the edge of the porch there. That now goes back to the original little stone building, where the little bell hung, and on Sundays and on holy days and during the week, it would be rung with a rope, it would be pulled with a rope to encourage the people to come to Mass. And this would start maybe about 10-15 minutes before Mass was due to start. The bell would start ringing. It was left there because now it had a totally different purpose. Because the people were standing here in the nave and everything else was going on really up in the chancel, people didn't really, they didn't understand Latin for a start, and they probably couldn't see. So at points, obviously when the host was being raised, and certain points in the Mass when they had to kneel, there would have been someone to ring the bell, and as soon as they saw that, the people would kneel. Now, as you can see, these walls and these ceilings are very, very high, and they're vaulted. And the reason for this is because the singing voice carries beautifully in this church. And if I could sing, I would be down in the chancel singing up to you, but trust me, you don't want to hear that at all. Musical instruments, the sound carries beautifully, but the speaking voice does not. You can hear a noise, but you cannot make out the words. So therefore, they were very clever in the Middle Ages. They had no microphones. They had nothing of that sort. So they discovered that you have these high walls with the vaulted ceiling. A few years ago, I met this wonderful stonemason, and he and I had a long chat, and he explained a lot about stonemasonry to me. And there's a few optical illusions he pointed out to me, and one of them has to do with the walls of the nave and the walls of the church generally. Because they are so high and they are parallel lines, If you recall from your little science classes, parallel lines as they vanish out into the distance, such as railway lines, or take a look at our gratings at the moment, they appear to be joining, getting narrower as they vanish. So the stonemasons were so clever, they had it measured to a fine point that as they put stone upon stone, they marginally took the wall out, just like that. So just ever so, all the way to the top of the ceiling, so that the walls actually look straight up. They look totally straight, whereas in actual fact, if they were totally straight, everybody would think that the ceiling was about to cave in on them any minute now, and we could never have that. But it's not the only optical illusion in this church, and I'll be telling you about another one in another one of these little virtual tours. In 1484, Pope Innocent VIII allowed St. Nicholas Church to become a separate ecclesiastical jurisdiction, thus turning the vicarage into a college or community of priests, and so it was able to call itself the Collegiate Church of St. Nicholas. In the same year, King Richard III of England granted the city its charter. The warden, who is the equivalent of the rector today, was to be elected by the municipal authorities of the town, which gave them an awful lot of control of what went on in this building. The town fathers immediately started on building this college, mainly the Lynch family, as they were the most powerful and the wealthiest in this town. The town was now growing rapidly. The merchants were becoming very wealthy and very, very prosperous. They were building the most magnificent townhouses. The city was now a walled city, but it always had St. Nicholas at its heart. And St. Nicholas Church benefited greatly from all this prosperity, as I will tell you in the next installment. One of the favourite sayings of our rector, the very Reverend Linda Pilo, is St. Nicholas Church in the heart of the city, with the city at its heart. We look forward to seeing you again in the next little episode of this virtual tour of St. Nicholas Church. So, fan slán agus beannacht libh. Farewell and stay safe. And if you have any comments or questions, please put them in the comment box.